What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Emery Cuzzy. I'm sitting here with Cameron Selby, and we are doing the Week 16 Saturday special. Two games on tap. We're going to do both showdowns for the KC and Houston game, and we're going to do Baltimore-Pittsburgh, so both sides. And then also we're going to do the two-gamer because why not do an awesome primetime slate this week? But yeah, we'll get into it.
Yeah, this one's going to be a whole lot of fun. And on top of that, we're going to be talking about these four teams a lot because these four teams are going to meet in different matchups on Christmas. And we're going to have a Christmas special as well with Houston playing Baltimore, Kansas City playing Pittsburgh.
Right.
And that's going to be Wednesday, so we'll be recording that, I believe, Monday. But yeah, we'll be talking about that a lot. But we're going to break down the showdowns first, and then we're going to get into the two-game slate. Should be a whole lot of fun. Should be similarities with the plays and what have you. But we're going to start with the Kansas City and Houston game, that is starting at 12 o'clock on Saturday.
All right. So you can see it up here on the board now. We're going to talk about the Houston side of the game first because they are the away team. That is going to include, let me get it to flex, receiver-wise, Nico Collins, excuse me, Tank Dell are the top two, and then you have to go all the way down here to Dalton Schultz. Not sure which third receiver you want to talk about, but Robert Woods is showing the highest RotoWire value at the moment. And then, of course, you have John Mechie, who's got a Q tag, and then Kate Stover, who I believe is going to be out. I don't know how he's got a Q tag here.
So right now, all of them are pretty underpriced based on their snaps, especially Robert Woods. He played 48% of the snaps this past week coming off the bye, and he's $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're doing a last guy in and you're trying to spend up top, that is the clear-cut guy to go to. And then if you're talking about John Mechie, for what it's worth, $2,800, way more expensive, but he still played a respectable 42%. And then right before the bye, that was where he had a 5-game stretch where he had 60+% of the snaps, and he had 70% one, and then right around 50 in week 13. So he's been the more consistent in terms of snap share. That's why his price is reflecting. He's had 4 of the last 5 games with at least 3 targets. Obviously, over the last 3 games, there's nothing exciting from that, but at least he's getting opportunities to where one of these guys should return pretty solid value.
Yeah. I would rather just go down to $1,000 Robert Woods.
Yeah, click on his game log over the last couple because he really kind of came on into playing respectable snaps once Stephon Diggs went down, plus Nico Collins was out a couple more games until that happened. But being $1,000, having, what is that, 9 targets over the last 5 games, about 2 targets a game. Being $1,000, you just need 1 catch for 10 yards to feel great about it. And if you got more upside than that, then that's good enough for me.
Nope. And then talking about the guys that actually are going to be getting the bulk of the work, Nico Collins is $11,000, most expensive player on the slate. I think it's he deserves it. He's been awesome. He's one of the best per game players in the league, but at the same time, that's a lot of money. $11,000 is a lot of money, and you're going to have to pick between him and his teammate Joe Mixon. So looking at his game log, though, he is going to have the highest target share. He's going to have the highest yards and possibly the most touchdowns on the team through the air. So he is definitely a viable player if you think he is going to pop off. He has upside of 36 points even. So he's always a good play.
Yeah, he's always a good play. And then even in the down games, like you saw last week, he only had 17 yards, but he caught 2 touchdowns. So he still is consistently getting 15-plus point floors basically every game other than the Dallas game, which, again, he had first play of the game, 75-yard touchdown. That was also his first game back. That catch for a touchdown was called back, and then they were just dominating, and they didn't really need him that much. And that has been his one dud since he's returned. So, yeah, he is safe and away the best option, and that's why he is so expensive.
And then Tank Dell is number 2. He has had some inconsistencies. Obviously, you can see he's been trending in the wrong direction recently. 9 targets, 7, 5, 4, 2. But we have seen him with good upside. He has 2 touchdowns on the year, positive touchdown regression here, hopefully, if you are going to play him. So at 6,600, which is kind of a pretty penny, especially because, or is the opposite, because he was 8,800, 8,400 with Nico down. So with Nico back, he hasn't been nearly as good. So we'll see what happens here.
Because we do a lot of best ball and we don't do like other people do where we just get shares of everybody and just crisscross our fingers hoping things work out. We take actual stands. He might be our best stand of the year in terms of guys we did not invest in up top, being 0% owned and just feeling even better about it, knowing that Nico and Stephon Diggs both missed significant time and he still has not panned out. Just is very, very telling because he was rivaling Stephon Diggs as a late third-round pick and trended towards passing him up at the very late stages of the summer. He just is not working out, and a lot of that has to do with C.J. Stroud regressing as well. So it's not just on him, but yeah, he just has not played well. He hasn't performed well. He's had one elite game, and that was against the Jets in a losing effort. But other than that, he's barely getting a 10-point ceiling on certain games, which is just not what you want to see. His price is cheap enough to where he's at least in the pool. But yeah, he's just really tough to have a confident investment in.
Yeah, I think the 6,600 makes him reasonable if you want to play him, but he is more of a tournament play in my opinion than anything in this situation. Sure. And then Dalton Schultz is the number one tight end. He's the other guy we'll talk about real quick. He has had actually better consistency of target share than even Tank Dell up to this point recently. And he just has to, his biggest thing is he has to get in the end zone to pay off, but he's $4,000. It's a reasonable price for someone that has some upside of 17 points and will be on the field constantly. I believe he's 94% last week. So
that was a season, or not a season best, but the best since week 5 for him. But one thing that was interesting, at least from the tight end perspective as a whole, Cade Stover has been the tight end too, basically the entire season. And he's been north of 40% of the snaps basically every single game since week 5. And he didn't play last week. It was Irv Smith that played.
It's because he had appendicitis.
Yes. Yeah. So obviously being on a day early but a short week, unknown if he'll even be available for that.
I'd be so surprised.
Exactly. So with that being said, Irv Smith being $600, he did play 46% of the snaps in his second game as a part of the team. He didn't get a target, but $600 is $600, and we need to afford some guys up top. So
right, for sure.
Same reasoning as investing in Robert Woods. Cheap guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get you a catch in there.
He's also a receiving threat. That is his bread and butter. He doesn't do anything else. All he does is catch the ball if he's going to do anything. So that makes a lot of sense for Irv Smith to be in the player pool. But then going over to the running back situation here, it's Joe Mixon.
Yes.
And that's it. And Joe Mixon has been awesome. So, like I said, he's 10-8. You had 11,000 Nico Collins. I kind of lean going with Joe Mixon over Nico because of the fact that he has such a high floor consistently because he's getting, he was getting 20 touches a game for, look at this, 4-game stretch, 5 games before this last one where he had 20 touches out of the 6. I'm more confident in him to have the floor, and he's getting the pass game work. In the last 3 games, he's had 6 targets.
Go back real quick to the at a glance tab for him, the first tab. What's interesting to me, if you look at it, the home games, he's averaging 2.6 yards a carry. Mm-hmm. Away games, he's averaging 5.2 yards a carry. This is an away game. And on top of that, they were at least a favorite before knowing we received word basically on my drive over here that Patrick Mahomes is actually going to play on his ankle injury, not going to be Carson Wentz. So there was a 5-point swing in terms of the spread on this game. So now Kansas City is favored. But still, Joe Mixon would be a 5-box running back if he wasn't at home. Thing is, it's a really, really tough matchup. So, but the thing is, there is a lot of cheap options, at least down low, to where you don't have to make a decision on Nico versus Joe, which is a very nice thing to see.
Yeah, for sure. And then, okay, we're done with Houston because that's the only guy I want to talk about in the running game.
Right.
Sorry, Damian. You're way down there, and you need to stay down there. But going to the KC side of the game, we're going to look at the receiving options. There's a few players that we get to talk about, Travis Kelce being one. They actually did price up Carson Wentz. Thank God if that would have been the other way around. Mm-hmm. DeAndre Hopkins, Xavier Worthy, Juju. Throw him in there. We'll throw Noah Gray in there. And I'll throw Justin Watson in there for why not. These are the guys that are going to be on the field. Some of them are going to be running wind sprints, Justin Watson. But otherwise, all of these guys have had upside. I think Juju actually scored the touchdown last week. On one catch, he had 7 yards and a touchdown. So if you think he can do that again, he's a dart throw. But really, it comes down to Travis Kelce, DeAndre Hopkins, Xavier Worthy, and Noah Gray has just been so good. So
I'm very glad about your tournament play, which I don't even know if he deserves to be a tournament play. But Noah Gray is my favorite Kansas City skill player to play.
yeah, price wise,
it's not even just price.
Crazy.
It's not even just price. It's him being over 55% of the snaps in every single week since week 4. And it's on top of that, he's getting at least 5 looks every single week. And on top of that, there's multi-touchdown upside. There's multiple red zone looks in this span. So at first, when it was week 11, he scored 2 touchdowns, and then there was a game against Carolina, 2 touchdowns again, and we were like, we're not. We had the Black Friday Showdown special that we had against the Raiders, and we're like, back-to-back 2 touchdown games. There's some regression coming, but it's just like, well, no, he's still going to play 60% of the snaps, and he goes 4 for 58 because he's really cheap at 36, and his price is cheaper than when that game was. I don't get it whatsoever why he has not been priced up, but right now there's nobody safer than him, and him being 3,200 is just a free click to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. He'll be in every lineup, and that's, he's just too cheap. Travis Kelce is the other tight end on this team who is, most known for his ability as a pass catcher. He has been meh, to say the least. I guess the fact that he came into the year being a top 3 tight end and has not looked like it. He's 4 for 27, 5 for 45, just been okay. But price wise, he makes a lot of sense at 8,600. He just needs to score touchdowns, and I'd expect him to actually get the positive regression on touchdowns because he's only had 2, while Noah's had 7 ridiculous amounts of touchdowns. So,
I mean, that just kind of is the layer of the land. He's going to project really well. Right now, I think he's the highest value, at least of the guys up top. He's showing 1.8x compared to everybody else, which, far and away, the highest value up top. 8,600 just feels too cheap. But the thing is, he has had a lot of duds, so it's warranted. There is more risk now. For the first time that I can remember playing Travis Kelce, there is risk baked in with it, and the price is showing that. But he's got multiple 13-plus target games that Kansas City's not running away with this AFC. And, Buffalo has the tiebreaker on them. They do have a 2-game buffer, but they need to win one of these next 3. And I don't know which game – is the for sure lock because, Kansas City, Houston, Pittsburgh, and Denver are all formidable. They're all in the playoffs right now. So they're probably going to win at least one of these games, but that's probably why Patrick Mahomes is toughing it out. And with that being said, he's going to be relying a lot on these quick outlets, and that's just his go-to guy. So he's worth mentioning. And then Xavier Worthy at least had double-digit targets this past week, which was a positive sight. He had a screen for a touchdown that ended up being a rushing touchdown at the very end of the day, but 19.6 fantasy points, very, very strong. That might be his season high of the year, except for week 1 where he had 2 touchdowns on his 4 touches. But at least week 1, what a call that was. But at least he's had 4 straight games where he's had at least 7 opportunities in 4 straight games. He actually had 14 opportunities this past week, which is by far a season high. So him being 7,000, his price hasn't really moved on Showdown slates in a long time. I think he's in the player pool pretty strongly, but more so as the last guy in than a core play.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about him in a little bit. But yeah, looking at the running back situation over here, I am not as confident on this side because Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt are still splitting snaps pretty evenly, I believe.
Yeah,
right?
Isaiah Pacheco is just still has not
37
exceeded
both
40% of the snaps since he's returned. And on top of that, he hasn't been efficient. And I did misspeak. He did go 46% of the snaps 2 weeks ago. But still, he has not had a breakout game or a boom game or an efficient-looking game since he's returned. He's straight up back to being in a committee, and I think it's going to stay that way at least through the regular season. I just can't pay $8,000 for him.
And I can't. I'm actually more comfortable paying for Kareem Hunt. He was almost my tournament play. Was Kareem Hunt? It's just Noah Gray is too cheap. That's why he's our tournament play.
Right. But then with Kareem Hunt, at least he has touch volume upside.
Right.
He hasn't really been getting consistent usage in the pass game, and since he's returned, all 3 games below 6 fantasy points, and obviously his price is reduced because he is now the RB2 or 1B in that offense, but at least snap wise, he's still also below 40% of the snaps. So all of these options, and on top of that, Houston is much worse against not much worse against the pass. They're
Right.
much worse against big play threats than they are against the run game and the short stuff. So Kareem Hunt's not really one of those guys that has those boom upside or explosive plays. So that's kind of why it's tough to get to him as well.
Yeah, but his price is a little bit cleaner than
reasonable.
an Isaiah Pacheco. Now let's build some lines actually, tell me your game script real quick and tell me what you think of this game.
So I had this game. I actually was going to pick Kansas City regardless
Okay.
in this game, even if Carson Wentz played. I really was interested in Kansas City as a home dog, but 20-17, it looks like you have a similar score as well.
Same score, yeah.
But it's just Houston has not really played well in the big games, at least other than upsetting Buffalo way
Right.
early in the season when they were not playing their best ball. But at the same time, I just think Kansas City, this isn't the team that's going to beat them or knock them off in any way. Maybe they limit them, and it's another ugly, grinded-out game that we've seen accustomed. And fantasy-wise, that maybe make it a more frustrating showdown. But I just have a lot of confidence in Kansas City pulling this game off.
Yeah, I also have 2017, both taking the under in this game. I wrote clash of mediocre play and division winners. Both of them have been mediocre. Both of them are going to win the division.
Well,
It is what it is.
With Houston, there's been inconsistency with a lot of the ways that they've been playing, and then they've also been barely beating bad teams.
Yeah.
With Kansas City, they're just winning every game other than the Buffalo game, and they're winning in different, unique ways. And, maybe there's some negative regression coming for them, winning on double doink field goals and block field goals and game-winning field goals, and they're basically finding every which way to win a game. But I don't think this is the opponent to do it.
Yeah, I think I wrote that this is a much bigger game for Houston, but
Yes.
KC is just going to win it. I think there's a bunch of ways to build lineups, though, and I think that there's almost every player on the slate is an option, including defenses. Both defenses are in play, so I think that's fun and interesting. But my must play is going to be Joe Mixon. I'm picking him over Nico if I had to pick between the two. One of them has to be your must play unless you're of course going to say like a really cheap guy. You could have said Noah Gray, of course, but that's kind of cheating. And then for you, it looks like you had Travis Kelce, but I don't know how confident you were in that.
Yeah, so Travis Kelce, it's a little more risky, but again, I think they'll. I don't know. It's he's had more boom than any other player in this offense, but he just has also his floor has just for the first time been low
Yeah.
in basically his career with Patrick Mahomes. So there is risk baked into the price, but I think him being a captain viable thing is what will open up some things. So that's kind of why I ended up putting him as a must play.
Yeah, and I'm going to be fading Xavier Worthy. We just talked about him a little bit. I think that there is going to be regression, and he has $7,000. I think you can go other places. And then you have C.J. Stroud at $10,000. That's a lot of money for a guy that has not been playing well, so I understand that one too. But let's get to a line. I already built my line, so I'll start first. I'm actually going to pick your must play to be my captain. My first look kind of went all over the place. Originally, I had something else, and I was like, no, I want to put both of these top guys in Joe Mixon and Nico. And then we're going to have to go grab, of course, our Noah Gray because he's just too cheap. He makes everything
We're
okay.
gonna have the same line again, aren't we?
I don't know. Are we?
No, we're not actually. But
Close?
Very close.
Okay. So this is my first line. I have Travis Kelce with Patrick. I have the double tight end for KC. It's great. If you haven't played the double tight end for KC, it works like the double running back for Detroit. And then I have the best players from Houston and my dart throw, Robert Woods.
So I'm actually, I like the build better this way. So I'm actually going to fade your must play in my first look. Same captain, and then the same other four, but instead of Joe Mixon and Robert Woods, I'm going to go up to Xavier Worthy at 7,000 to get some more correlation with Kansas City. And then also I'm going to, as the last man in, go with Kyrie Fairbairn. I know I did say 20-17, but let's just cross my fingers and say maybe it's 16 instead and he gets 3 field goals.
Fair.
Because you look at his game log, every single game since week 4, he's had at least 9 fantasy points.
Yeah, he's solid.
So as long as it's fair weather, he basically gets more field goal attempts than any other person, and I don't think He's had a couple misses in there, but basically he's had 8 games since week 4 where he's had at least 3 field goal attempts. So that's kind of why I wanted to ride with him instead of Harrison Butker, who missed his only field goal attempt in Cleveland. Granted, there were some wins, but also first came back from a knee injury, and also it sounds like there's still kind of some lingering effects because he is kind of landing and planting very differently than we're accustomed to seeing.
Right.
So he's the much safer kicker to me, and I like the safety of this lineup a little bit more.
You'd pick Nico. So you're saying you'd go Nico over Joe Mixon?
Yes.
Okay. So then this is Cam's first look. And then what we'll do is we're going to get on to the next showdown.
Yeah.
Let me switch over the tabs. We're going to look at the Pittsburgh-Baltimore game. And we'll start with Pittsburgh. Looking at the receivers, we're going to assume George Pickens is out or in.
Because it's a hamstring injury and he was ruled doubtful like as of last Monday.
Yeah.
For the following game. Usually when you're doubtful, you don't really have much of a chance on a short week to return the following week. So he really needs to practice in full on Wednesday for me to even be comfortable.
Right, for sure.
Considering him in. And even if he is in, 10-6 is a lot of money to go, even though it's a good matchup. But really, I'm kind of hoping that he is out because there's a lot of value from the Pittsburgh side if he is indeed not going to play.
So let's assume that he's out and go from there. And, of course, if he's in, he's viable. He's one of the better receivers, and, you know, Russ is going to look for him. So definitely click his name if you are comfortable playing the receiving side of this game. But the other guys that we have to talk about, Pratt Freiermuth, who had a solid game this last week with 3 for 22 and a touchdown, gave him 11.2 points. He's had over 10 points in the last 3 games, been solid. And then Calvin Austin has been what is the backup, the next guy up if George Pickens is out. He had 5 for 5 for 65 this last week against Philly. Solid numbers. He's at 4,800. I think it's a good price for somebody like that.
Yeah, Calvin Austin was the guy that stuck out for me, and I'm going to be bringing his name up a lot in the when we talk about the 2-game slate because his price is just way, way too cheap. At least in this one, you got to kind of indulge in it a little bit because there are some Pittsburgh receivers that are at least getting snaps that are minimum price for some reason kind of thing. And,
right.
But, yeah, Calvin Austin, pretty safe. He's been the one that has stepped up the most from a upside perspective. We've seen a showdown contest where he caught a touchdown that you called out as your tournament play, I believe, that week, or at least the last guy in.
Yeah.
And again, like you said, 5 for 55 or 5 for 65 last week. 3 of the last 4 games at least double-digit points. So yeah, he is in the pool. It's a good matchup.
And then going over to the other guys, Mike Williams and Van Jefferson, kind of like the last 2 guys in the dart throw-wise, 3,400 and 3,000. Wanted to add them on here. Not much to say. I guess Mike Williams has been actually...
Mike Williams is the only one I don't want to play.
Yeah.
Because his snap share with George Pickens out has not increased really at all. He had 35% of the snaps last week, but they played way less snaps. So his 15 snaps was the lowest in 5 weeks. But because they played so few, that's why his percentage was the highest.
Gotcha.
But he's not being used at all. It just is what it is. I'm not paying $3,400 for him. I'd rather pay Van Jefferson, who at least runs cardio and gets on the field 75% of the time. I'd rather play Scotty Miller, who's, I believe, minimum price.
Yeah.
Because he's at
800.
least 800. Okay, so under 1,000 because he played 52% of the snaps week 14. Last week was way less in a kind of weirder game script, but also against the number 1 scoring defense this year, or at least yardage defense. And then also Ben Skoranek, who 3 straight games, 33%, 31%, 23% of the snaps. He's minimum price. 2 of the 3 games he's got a target, but they're for 17 and 23 yards.
Right.
Is when he catches it. So him being minimum price,
Sure.
I'd rather do that as well.
Yeah.
So Mike Williams of any of the Pittsburgh receivers, if Pickens is out, is still dead last for me in terms of my interest.
Gotcha. And then the running side of the game, there's 2 guys, of course. They've had this situation all year. The 7,600 Najee and 7,200 Jaylen Warren. Najee's preferred, of course. He actually averages about 5.5 points more fantasy points per game, but he did kind of have a dud in this weird Philly game. Something we have to talk about.
Negative game script again.
Yeah.
Philly's probably the hottest defense right now. They're not getting all the turnovers and pick sixes that Denver is, but they're not allowing points, which is what Denver has been doing against good teams.
Plus, you said the snaps were a lot lower this last week for Pittsburgh because of the Philly situation. So with that happening, you have less opportunities, and Najee obviously only had 6 on rushing. So
Yeah, and he also had a season low 33% of the snaps as a result. Jalen Warren at least is kind of getting back into the, basically splitting at 50-50, which is good to see. But Najee being, a 20 upside touch player, even in the last game that they did play against Baltimore. Again, Baltimore is really good against the run, but he still had 93 yards on 22 opportunities, or 23 opportunities. He had 22 touches. Had 13 points, reasonable. He didn't score, but if this is a low-scoring game where he's the only one that scores, he's going to be optimal as a result. 7,600 is not that expensive to spend up on.
right. In this game, which I didn't say at the beginning, but it's a 44.5 point total. Baltimore's -6. So, I mean, it's really not that many points, actually. 19.25 is what they're projected. So that's actually the least out of the 4 teams we're going to talk about today. So I thought it might be a little bit higher. Now that I'm looking at it, it's not as good as I thought it was. But Jalen Warren, 7.7, but he has had more opportunities to get on the field recently. He is out there to catch the ball, mostly because he is not getting the touches in the rushing game. Even knowing he had more snaps in the game against Cleveland, he had 7 less rushing attempts.
Yeah, with him, it's the pass catching upside because he's got four straight games other than last week where he had at least 4 targets, and he's usually a good PPR back, getting he's got a 14-yard average, 12-yard average in there, but he usually makes well when he gets those targets and opportunities. I think Najee is going to have more touches, but maybe he's going to have the more important touches if they're trailing and has more pass catching upside. Again, weird game last week against Philly, but they need somebody to help push the ball down the field because 2 straight games they have looked very inept offensively without George Pickens, and if he's out again, they have to find ways to not make that 3 straight. They did win the first game against Baltimore. Doing a sweep would go a long way of locking up this division. That's why I think that they're really going to try to do some things to steal this game.
Yeah, fair enough. And then let's go over to the other side of the game, looking at the Baltimore side. Baltimore has some pass catchers we have to talk about. They're a good amount, actually. All 3 of these guys here are going to be the main guys. Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and Mark Andrews. And then Isaiah Likely's in play. Deontay's not in play. Nelson Aguilar's not in play. I guess that's it.
Yeah, and again, Deontay Johnson is away from the team even following his suspension. So he's, again, as soon as that trade happened and they were like, that's the last piece that's going to put Baltimore over the top, and look, if he could do that with Andy Dalton, what is he going to do with Lamar? And I was like, that is the worst offense for him. And lo and behold, that was a disaster of a trade for them. Obviously, they didn't give up a day 1 or day 2 pick for him, but It was just never going to work out. And on top of that, Rashad Bateman has actually finally started to show his stuff and what he's capable of. He had back-to-back touchdowns last week, deep balls, 3 for 80 and 2 scores, but he's got 7 touchdowns on the year. He's got plenty of boom games like this where he has the 15-plus point upside. As a wide receiver, too, I always thought he could work. He was never going to be a 10-target guy, but he's got the boom. Obviously, you see 26 yards a catch, 21 yards a catch, 15 yards a catch. Overall this year, I think he's north of 15 yards if I'm looking up his overall stats this year, 17 yards a catch. So that is exactly what you want in a wide receiver too. $7,000, kind of pricey, more in the tournament range, but I don't think that this is a slate where you're really going to have a hard time getting to him if you really, truly want to get to him.
Yep. And then going over to the other guys, Zay Flowers has been inconsistent, I guess is the best way to put it. It's very based on how the game is going if he is going to get the ball. So if the game is where Baltimore's winning, he's not going to touch the ball. It's all going to be Derrick Henry. And if it's the other way around, he will get a bunch of targets, and then you'll get the Justice Hill in the game and things like that. Inconsistency's been bad,
Baltimore is very frustrating
Yes.
as a whole.
Agreed.
And you talk our Sunday live slate, or Sunday live stream. At the very end, I asked you who was the scariest player to you. You said Zay Flowers, and I said Derrick Henry. They had 5 touchdowns.
Both of them sucked.
5 touchdowns, and neither scored.
Yeah.
That's just kind of what you got to live and die by with Baltimore. And so that's why it's so frustrating a lot of times. But in Showdown slates, at least you have to force some of these guys in, which it makes a little bit more sense. $9,000 for a wide receiver one, not bad at all. At least he has the floor of a 10-point upside for most games. But he's also got some boom, and he's kind of due for one of those boom games. So against Pittsburgh, who's been more susceptible, they just allowed nearly 300 yards passing to the lowest volume passing team in the NFL last week to both Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. So it's there for him if he wants it. That's just kind of – it starts with Baltimore's passing attack. I'm probably going to be fitting Zay Flowers because he's going to just organically be able to stack with the Lamar in that instance.
Fair. Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. Mark Andrews has come on to the end of the season, which is great. Finally, 6,400. Let's look at his game log real quick. He has scored the touchdowns. That's what all that matters. 4 out of 5. It doesn't matter how good he's done over here. I promise. If he's scoring the touchdowns, he's got a floor, 6,400. He's a reasonable price. He's the guy I'm going to be getting to, absolutely, especially if I want the Lamar build.
Yeah, I was always frustrated because basically we've seen, 5 showdowns now for Baltimore this year, and he was just 5,000 or less. Since the week 1 travesty or panic mode of Isaiah Likely going off for what would have been 2 touchdowns and 130 yards, and he didn't really play, and then a couple weeks into it, back-to-back no-catch games, and the sky is falling, and then all of a sudden he catches 8 touchdowns, and all is well again. Obviously didn't have a lot of targets last week, but that was also because they were just up so much against the Giants. I expect this to be a much closer contested game. So 6,400 is still reasonable, even though it's finally kind of where his price should be, which is a welcome sight. Yep.
And then let's talk some game script.
Well,
yeah,
first off,
defense. Running back. Yeah, let's talk with this guy.
You can throw in Lamar too, because
running back.
It's one or the other to me in this game. I don't think that there's a way you can afford both. Justice Hill, $4,000. Sign me up if you're thinking what I'm thinking. Last time you did it in week 1 as your tournament play, it worked out pretty well. Last week I mentioned in the first look main, I was like, if you don't like Derrick Henry, getting Justice Hill at 4,800, he has the same matchup.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not close and Derrick Henry doesn't score in that 45% of the snaps, Justice Hill might. And lo and behold, 18 fantasy points, he probably was less than 1% owned.
Yeah.
I just didn't play him. I didn't listen to myself. But $4,000, his price might be the cheapest it's been on a true showdown. I see some 32 and 36, but those are, small Sunday main showdown slates specifically. But yeah, he's really, really cheap for the snaps that he plays. Last week in a blowout game, still played 37%, but he's been north of 30% every single game this season, and he's their pass catching back. So if they are trailing or in a 2-minute drill, he's the guy in. Mm-hmm. Derrick Henry's not getting any snaps or touches doing that. So $4,000, really interesting. Derrick Henry, $12,000. Really, really tough to get to. And again, I think you need to decide on one or the other because he's probably going to fall into the end zone. But again, you saw the Pittsburgh game where at that point in the season, I believe his 11.5 fantasy points, which he did score, but only 65 yards on the game, was his second lowest score of the entire season.
Yeah.
And then obviously he had a dud last week to eclipse that. To me, it's tough matchups for both him and Lamar. You got to pick one. And I wanted to bring up, again, Lamar, week 11, he was on the early only slate, the most popular play at north of 40% owned. And my notes when I wrote, my first thing was I'm fading him because in career games against Pittsburgh, he had 7 interceptions at the time in 4 games against Pittsburgh, had never beaten them, sacked 20 times, and averaged less than 16 points a game. Well, what did he do in that game? Did not score 16 points, only scored 1 touchdown, and also threw a pick and got sacked a ton. So his struggles against Pittsburgh has been really paramount. The thing is, who else are you going to spend up on? Because you're not fading both of these guys.
No.
You just can't from a raw points game if you think it's going to be a lower scoring game. And he's been playing better as of late. Obviously, a 5-touchdown game last week. His rushing upside has been up there. He's had several games of 60-plus yards and scoring touchdowns. And this is his best season to me of his career, and he's a 2-time MVP, and he's still not going to win the MVP.
No.
That's how well he's played. I'd probably side with Lamar, even knowing he struggles against Pittsburgh, instead of Derrick Henry. But it's a really, really uncomfortable conversation. I just think my one stand is I'm not playing both, which I think a lot of people are going to try to fit in both.
That's fair. Well, Now, what does your game script look like?
So my game script, I think this is another grinded out game. Last game, Baltimore, following a game where they scored 35 or allowed 30 plus points against Cincinnati and still won the game. They followed that up, and then Pittsburgh did not score a touchdown and
Right.
still beat them. I think Pittsburgh typically kind of has their number in a grinded out game. So if it gets too ugly, I think Pittsburgh can still find a way to pull this off. I am going to pick Lamar and the Baltimore Ravens to win. I believe my score is 20-13. Ugly game for all points. Try to find the guys that get the 2 touchdowns for Baltimore. 3 touchdowns maybe, but I still really think that this is an ugly game where probably these 2 teams combine for 3 or less touchdowns.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be on a little bit higher. I'm going to pick Lamar also. I have it 27-13. I had him getting extra touchdown. And I just think, like you said, Lamar's been playing great. And in 9 out of his 14 games, he's had multi-touchdown passing games, and Pittsburgh was not one of them. I think that he's just going to have, it's going to be, Baltimore at home, vengeance, finally getting a hold of this Pittsburgh team without their best receiver. I just think that's what kind of gets me going. And I think, I'm going to talk about so let's talk about our must plays. Lamar is the must play, truly, for both of us probably is Lamar. But you have another guy, obviously.
I wouldn't consider Lamar must play because if you do side with Derrick Henry as being the guy that gets the 1 or 2 touchdowns, then go with him. So I'm not confident in Lamar for sure being in my line. Okay. I just know one of them will be and one of them won't be at the end of the day. This is not a three lineup build. This is a 1 lineup, similar to what you said about the other Showdown. Only 1 lineup, how we're going to do this. But I sided with my lineup, including Lamar. And if I'm going to, I'm going to put Zay Flowers in at 9,000 because he organically is just going to fit for me. I know you're going to be a little disagreement on that because Zay Flowers is actually your fade on this contest, but mine is Derrick Henry. Again, whoever, take a stand on one of the 2 up top. I don't think you need both. Pick one or the other, and I'm going to go with the Lamar in my line and Derrick Henry not.
Okay, perfect. And then for me, Zay is my fade. My contrarian play is Rashad Bateman because he has been really good. And if you're going to get the boom game, that's the guy you need. And then your contrarian play is the Pittsburgh defense, which I find very interesting.
Well, the thing is, nobody's going to play him because Baltimore is very hot right now. They're also almost a touchdown dog on the road, all that good stuff. But last time they played, had 9 fantasy points, very respectable, and they basically had a floor of 7, basically all but 2 games this season. So I think they're the number 2 overall defense in terms of fantasy points. So if this is just another ugly, grinded out game where it's just field goals and defense is what comes down to it, I think they're just going to be under 15 to 17% owned, and they're cheap. They let things fit. So that's kind of why they stood out to me on this slate.
Gotcha. So let's get into builds. My build is going to be epic. You're going to be like, holy crap.
All right. Then why don't you start off with it? You go the first look.
Lamar Jackson at cap. Okay. I'm going to go Mark Andrews. I am going to put Justice Hill on this line because I think Justice Hill makes some sense. I'm going to be going with the other defense. I'm not going to go with the same defense as you. I'm going to go with the Ravens at 4,400. I see that we're only on the Ravens. Hold on 1 second. Let me grab Pittsburgh. Can't not play them. I'm going to go with the fact that George Pickens is out. I'm going to go pick the second guy in command, which is going to be Calvin Austin. And then I have $12,100. I'm going to play both Derrick Henry and Lamar on this line.
Wow. That's pretty solid.
5-1. Yeah. I'm picking 13 points for Pittsburgh, so I'm trying to get away from the fact that
I'm always on that side. If you're projecting somebody under 13 or under 14 points, play their defense. And so don't fault you for that. I just don't think it'll be that one-sided, but that's just a different game script. But I don't mind it. It's a natural build with what your game script is, so that's why I like it.
Yeah. And then for you?
So mine makes me a little nervous.
Okay.
Because the thing is, again, I'm playing one line in this contest, and I just kind of need to side with wanting to play Chris Boswell, but my first look as I built does not have him.
Okay.
So we got to figure it out. Maybe I put him in, maybe I don't. But I'm going to put Zay Flowers at my captain because he makes things work. I'm going to put Lamar. I'm going to put Rashad Bateman and Mark Andrews.
Okay, I like it.
My bring back is Jalen Warren in pass catching work. And because they're cheap and they're the last guy in, I'm going to put in the Steelers defense.
Okay. I think it's reasonable. Just makes me worried. Steelers defense versus the rest of the Baltimore team, of course.
Right.
But, I mean,
again,
you have
if you're
to
going
put
for
somebody
points
in
and
down
this
there.
is a 20 to 13 game like I'm predicting, like I can still find an avenue where Pittsburgh at 3,600 still gets 7 points somehow, some way. And maybe Lamar doesn't have his 25-point game and isn't going to be as popular as a captain, or as optimal as a captain as he should be. And then whoever catches the touchdown, a la Zay Flowers or Rashad Bateman or Mark Andrews, that's the optimal captain because just nobody else is really scoring points.
I mean, points against wise, they sit around the 20-point mark and 15, 7, 10, 15, 7, 9. They had 9 last time they played. Only gave up 16 points, but you think they're giving up 20? I mean, it's not that big of a difference, so I don't hate it. Makes some sense because this is a very hard slate. This is one of the hardest slates I think we've had because of the fact that we are probably going to have to predict raw points and then being willing to play maybe even both defenses. You could have got both defenses and both kickers in that Rams game. You would have been absolutely right with Puka at captain.
And I do want to say Chris Boswell by far running away as the kicker 1, but he's also would be tight end 2, wide receiver like 13 overall this year from a fantasy points per game perspective. And basically he's just getting at least 2 field goal attempts every week. Yeah. And most of those are coming from distance. So if it's fair weather, to me, I think if price didn't matter, I'd rather get to Boswell over Pittsburgh if you only had to choose one. But he's got multiple 20-point games in there. He's got 16 games, 14, 17. Yeah. And then the floor of being 8 basically every game, but other than 2 out of 15 games this year, he's been less than 8 points. So
yeah,
I mean, he's as safe as it gets. He's the best kicker in this game, at least, which is saying something because Justin Tucker is the best of all time.
Yep. But let's go over and grab the last slate because I don't think we have anything else to do on the slate, right?
No.
Okay.
Let's get into our 2-gamer. And we don't really have to break it down by team and position because we've already done that.
Yeah.
We'll just kind of look into some prices and see what direction you want to go because really I don't know if there's a single stand I want to take at quarterback. Usually we can eliminate 1 or 2 of them, but basically there's one up top. Patrick Mahomes, now that we know he's in the game at modestly 64, and then we'll get into the rest of the prices. I think Russell Wilson is 58, which very elite matchup, but just it's very scary without George Pickens, which we're going to project out 57 actually, and then C.J. Stroud probably the one guy that I wouldn't play just because he's 6,000 and he just is not having any boom.
I mean, if I just look at the slate off the rip, I mean, Patrick Mahomes stands out as the best play to me. Because, Russell Wilson isn't necessarily a bad play, but I just would rather go to the Patrick Mahomes side. Lamar Jackson's a great play. He's just really expensive, man. That's expensive. And so let's try to build. Which quarterback do you want to build with? Because I'll pick Patrick Mahomes. You get to pick one.
Okay. Well, I'm going to do Lamar Jackson.
Okay, we'll start there.
Just because you're forcing it up. And then I'm going to stack him with Zay Flowers. His price really stood out to me because this contest released before the Showdown.
That's pretty cheap.
I was like, I'm playing Zay Flowers no matter what at 59. Mm-hmm. And then you look at other options and Bateman being 49 and all that stuff is very interesting. So just plug him in and see if we can fit. Do
you like Mark Andrews? Well, what tight ends do we have just to see?
So Kelsey's 56.
Okay.
Andrews a little bit more reasonable at 43. Freiermuth, it's worth noting. He led the team in targets last week and he scored touchdowns in 2 straight games. So they're all 4 tight ends, starting tight ends are in the pool. But Noah Gray, again, my favorite, being $3,200. There is no other receiver other than Calvin Austin below 4,000 that I'm interested in. So I think double tight end is very viable, and it starts with Noah Gray plus extra tight end.
Right. Okay, let's throw Bateman in there. 49. Okay. I think Calvin Austin as your bring back, unless you want to go Najee.
So the thing is with running back, I don't know what I want to do. If you look, there's a lot of red with the opponent ranks because nobody's a good matchup.
Right.
So it's basically who's falling into the end zone. We're taking the stand that we're not playing Derrick Henry in this line because we have Lamar. I'm going to put Joe Mixon your must play in the showdown and by default. And then really, do you want to go with the Justice Hill call again? Do you want to? I think Jalen Warren's pretty cheap for the potential role he'll have.
Solid price.
I think throwing one of them in for now and then seeing if we can get to Najee is probably what I would prefer with this build.
Okay. Let's go throw Noah Gray in.
Yes.
Let's go pick a defense so we can see our money.
And again, Steelers being 25 is very, very reasonable. In a lower scoring game, it's worth noting the Chiefs-Texans game is 3 points lower in terms of total.
Yeah.
They're both pretty cheap. I think the only defense I'm not interested in playing is Baltimore, actually.
Yeah, I agree. I think personally, it's your winner of the Texans-Chiefs game and then the Steelers.
Yeah.
Because of the price. I would side with the Chiefs.
Okay.
Because of the $200, and it's not in this game.
Mm-hmm. It is worth noting, Texans have the second most sacks in the NFL this year, and Kansas City's been bad recently protecting Patrick Mahomes. And on top of that, he's got a bum ankle, so maybe he's given up a little more sacks than to protect himself throughout the game, and maybe they return price even in a loss.
I have the build.
So you do?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Nico
again.
And then it's Calvin.
Yep.
So that's pretty self-explanatory on how I feel. Well, it's also, you could go Pat here if you wanted to instead. You pick your favorite Pittsburgh receiver here, basically. And
I think projection-wise, they like
Calvin?
Pat a little bit
really?
more.
Okay.
Because
either way.
as of right now, they're still technically projecting Pickens in, but I think even with them out, I think they'll still give Pat the nod. They're showing him as 8.75 versus Calvin Austin at 6.68, which will probably be bumped up maybe a point.
Gotcha.
Should George Pickens officially be ruled out. So I'll probably side with Pat Freiermuth in this specific build.
That's fine. It's either one of them. I don't think either one's bad. If you wanted to go with Pat, either way, I think that the build's really cool. I think that's kind of a great first look for not even talking about it prior.
Gotcha.
Makes a lot of sense in my personal opinion.
Right. Well, let's try a Mahomes build.
All right, Mahomie. 64. Guys you want to get to. Did you see any prices that really stuck out to you?
I think Xavier being 5,000 coming off his most used game is interesting. Noah Gray, again, if I'm playing Mahomes, I'm playing Noah Gray.
Yep.
And I'm also interested in playing
I was going to
Kelce
say,
as
we
well
play both of them.
to be different.
I'll stick with this. Actually, we don't have to in this build. I just didn't want to do it against Baltimore.
Well, I don't think it makes any – other than Kansas City just not getting defensive stats so far this year, they've been an overall good defense.
Right.
But Houston hasn't been scoring points. So I don't understand being 2,700. That just kind of seems too low. I bet you they're probably going to be the most popular defense because they're a favorite at 2,700 in the lower total game.
Currently, they are the most popular. Then Baltimore. Houston is pulling 0%, which is not realistic. But I would probably say the Chiefs and then Pittsburgh. I do want to play Joe Mixon. I don't know if I'd rather play. Fine. Do you want Joe Mixon or do you want Nico? Is the real question.
I think we can find a way to get both.
Okay, then I will go down to Pittsburgh at that point. Then.
Okay.
And that'll give us some $200 and stuff.
That's fine. And we'll just pretend that maybe Baltimore and Kansas City is just the script that I'm predicting. So
fair.
For this one, you seem more confident in Najee if you had to pick a Pittsburgh running back, right?
Sure.
Well, then
I think I understand game script wise that Jalen Warren makes sense, and I actually looking at the snap share, Jalen Warren's outsnapped Najee in the last 2 weeks.
Yep. And
so I kind of
right now,
am okay with it.
Projection-wise, they're within a point of each other. They both are 29% owned for RotoWire right now. So
interesting. Straight
up, just pick one. I think Warren saving $500 is fine and reasonable. Other than that, I would go ahead and put Kelce in, right?
Perfect. I was going to do that, but I was just like,
okay, last guy's in. I think the easiest, put Zay in, and then you got enough for either Hopkins or Worthy. I think
triple
this
stack
will be
is great.
chalkier, but if you wanted to get a little different and save some money, going Xavier Worthy, who's going to project worse and probably be less owned.
Right.
Right now, DeAndre Hopkins is showing as the third most popular guy on in terms of all receivers, and then Xavier Worthy almost half his ownership at 29%.
Okay. So, yeah, either way, I like both of them. I think it's a really good build. You get both Houston guys that we want, and you get all the KC guys, and then you're just writing the script that Baltimore, Pittsburgh sucks, and I'm okay with that because they've sucked in the past. It's not like it's going to surprise anybody.
And then also up top, if you had to pick between one running back between Henry and Mixon, you have enough in this lineup at least to afford both or either.
Okay.
So do you still side with Mixon over Derrick Henry? They're both projecting exactly at 17.
I do. I think I saw. Yeah, I definitely side with Mixon over Henry, but
Henry's showing 70% ownership right now.
That's crazy. Mm-hmm. Oh crap!
Which again, with RotoWire, they're not great at doing small contest ownership and stuff like that. They're showing 85% to Zay Flowers and 0% to certain defenses. Like they've got bugs in there, but for the most part, they're pretty spot on with if you had to rank the popularity of running backs. Right. So that will probably make me assume, with it being a 10% gap, that Derrick Henry will be the most owned running back, even though he is the most expensive.
I thought that Justice Hill's ownership at 8.4 was interesting.
Yep. Because nobody wants to play him because they're like, he's got to break one for it to work out. But it's just like, well,
he's done it.
You just never know.
A couple times.
He's done it.
So, but yeah, I think that this is a cool build, Patrick Mahomes wise. These are kind of just first looks. We will send our final picks into Discord. Let me stop sharing. We appreciate y'all hanging out with us. We're going to have, of course, this video, and we also did a Thursday Night Football video for the Chargers and the Denver Broncos game, and then we're going to have Maine coming up for Sunday, live stream on Sunday. Lots of bowl games going on. We're going to have me and Dustin are probably going to do some sort of playoff bowl game talk just to go back over everything because it's just such a fun time of the year. So very excited.
Yeah, only 2 more regular season live streams on Sunday the rest of the year. Week 18, we will not do a live stream, but we will play lines and do a first look and video. But there is no showdown that week because all games are on Sunday. Mm-hmm. And then playoffs, we still haven't decided how we're going to approach doing it, but we're going to do a live stream probably on the Saturday. But if we end up not being able to do schedule conflicts, then we'll just put out a first look for mains and then some showdowns and stuff like that. But regardless, a lot of content to look forward to and post. And then also we're coming up on our 1-year reflection period. It's been a whole lot of fun, been a great ride so far, and I'm just excited to keep on expanding and growing this community.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about, honestly. I mean, this football never ends. We act like it does. I mean, of course it ends. Super Bowl's in February, and then you have to wait till September. But we don't end because we have the draft, and then we're going to have other things going on.
Too early stuff.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten into the entertainment of games. We haven't started doing interviews with people.
Yeah.
All those kinds of various videos and things are stuff that are on tap. And so as soon as the season ends, there is no, we're going to take a month off and figure it out. No, we're going to come out with 3 to 5 videos basically every single week, all year round, as long as our schedule allows us to do so.
Right.
That's the only way we're going to get bigger and grow and get well known. So that's what I'm excited to do.
Yep. So we appreciate y'all hanging out with us, and we'll see y'all on the next one.